where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
We've got now a real crunch few days for Brexit.
We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Westin on Bloomberg Radio.
We welcome now someone on the front lines of global trade. Jean Seroka is Executive Director of the Port of Los Angeles, the nation's biggest and its busiest port. So, Jean, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Dave.
First of all, give us a sense from the front lines. How badly is your business being hit right now?
We're running about 75% of normal container lift, and we have 40 vessel sailings canceled from February 11th through April 1st now.
Do you have any visibility going out?
Beyond that, our guidance for the first quarter of the year is that we'll be down about 15%, and it looks like it's going to take us some time to get back to a sense of normalcy within our supply chain.
Well, that's one of the questions, because a lot of people, economists early on, said this is more like a V. It'll come bouncing right back like SARS. Is this like SARS, do you think?
I lived in Shanghai during SARS. It's not. What we see is that it's going to take a prolonged period of time to get workers back to the factories, to get the momentum going behind production, and then movement out to the ports. All of those supply chain partners right now are working with skeleton crews. And moving forward, yes, we may see a big spike, but I don't know when that's going to start. Then you'll get into normal or traditional peak season, back to school, et cetera. So there's going to be something moving here that's going to keep pinching towards the middle.
How do people, you, but also shippers, adjust to this as a practical matter? Are there other changes you can make to fill up the supply lines?
Yeah, we have to be nimble, number one. But it's an asset balancing equation that we're trying to play right now. With these ships being canceled coming in, we've got empty containers piling up here in the United States and specifically at our ports. If there is going to be a rebound and a spike once folks go back to work in Asia and China specifically, it's going to take those empty containers being repoed over there to be positioned to load up and bring back. So this teetering back and forth, not so much having the ability to have a balanced supply chain, is really going to be the equation we have to solve for.
Are there some suppliers around the world, not in China, who might be in a position to step into the breach?
To an extent, and with the ill-advised trade debate that we had, which resulted in a fourth quarter drop in our volume of more than 16%, we've started to see that migration to Southeast and South Asia as far as U.S. companies of import record sourcing cargo factory design. What I mean by that is that it takes about 7 Vietnams to make up for China. But we did see double-digit growth in Southeast Asia origin shipments to the U.S. through the Port of Los Angeles last year. Key stat, though, is for every new container we gained from Southeast Asia, we lost 2.5 from China.
Wow. How do you protect against the safety risks? I mean, of people coming on the ships, of possible infections of some of your people, let me say, at the Port of Los Angeles.
Yeah, U.S. Coast Guard jumped into action very quickly as we started to have this global conversation, resetting the regulations, making sure that our Los Angeles Port Police, all the other allied agencies, including the CDC in Atlanta and LA County Health, were involved. We have a little bit different view, as it takes about 14 days from a vessel sailing into Los Angeles from its origin, which could look like some of the medical experts' advice on the incubation period. We're also watching our crews and disembarkation locations from passengers who have gotten on from earlier stops.
What about Mr. Navarro's point? Does he have a point, in fact, in this sense? Is it possible people will rethink supply chains because of this?
Yes, and that's been ongoing because of the past 20 months' worth of rhetoric back and forth between Washington and Beijing. As I mentioned, you have seen sourcing migration take place now down to Southeast and South Asia. There's always been this conversation in our area around China plus one. Did we as a collective have too many eggs in one basket, and could you find relief valves in other places? This is a temporary look, but remember also, the U.S. economy has been strong for the better part of the time since the recession. So the factories in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, et cetera, have been running at full bore for a long time too. Now an importer who wants to change sourcing from China to these other locations is fighting for factory floor space.
How much of your business comes from China? How much of it comes from Asia more generally?
A little bit more than 50% from China and about 98% in total from Asia.
Wow. So does this change your long-term projections, your long-term strategy for
the rules
Los Angeles?
Yeah, Dave, the rules have changed, so we have to reinvent ourselves. We must be nimble. I think there's a bigger play here for American exports going to Asia, because what that will do, in effect, Losing imports, gaining exports may balance out our trade a little bit, and more importantly, our cost to serve. We can then be a more attractive gateway for those who want to work with us.
And what does this do to margins as a practical matter?
Overall, it compresses margins. We saw that from earnings reports last year in 2019 to what our industry is doing with respect to the downline look and market guidance. And for us, it's a movement of revenue that if we're down 15% in the first quarter, that has a direct impact on how we reinvest in our port's physical, digital infrastructure, as well as our environmental strategy.
Who are your competitors?
Right next door, the Port of Long Beach. Ports along the West Coast. But more importantly, what we've seen as a trend over the last 18 years is the strongest competition we face is coming from the East and Gulf Coast ports. They've hired great talent, invested a tremendous amount of money, and they found the legislative powers to attract business.
Fascinating. Really appreciate you being here. That's Gene Seroka of the Port of Los Angeles. He runs it, and it's the biggest and the busiest in the country.